He's constantly smoking, and at some point he starts howling, and he's howling like an animal.
Since all testimonies are narratives, I'll approach my analysis of Hurd's testimony with concepts from narrative theory. I'll start by quickly explaining the ground rules of narrative theory in order to test the question, is Amber Heard's testimony reliable? And as I'll show, there's a lot that indicates that her testimony is unreliable. If it's your first visit to this channel, welcome. I make videos about different conversations and show principles that are useful to know in every daily interaction. If you like the video, please press the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. There's narrative form and narrative function. The first form element is characters. That's the protagonist, the hero we're supposed to empathize with, and that's the antagonist, the enemy. The second form element is theme. Theme is the overall meaning of the narrative. These form elements serve two function elements: identification between the audience, the narrator, and the protagonist, and persuasion, where the narrator taps into certain values and behavior in order to get the audience to emote. This is how testimonies are designed. In Heard's narrative, she's both the narrator and protagonist, and Depp is the antagonist. The theme is to highlight that Heard is a victim. Let's start by observing how positive qualities are ascribed to Heard.
It was the hardest thing I had ever had to do.
Thank you, Amber.
The pause is worth noting. Her attorney waits a few seconds before thanking her, which adds to Heard's statement. The deliberate pause highlights the pathos appeal, which is the predominant appeal that Heard's defense team uses. Next, the goal is to emphasize Heard's humble beginnings. In theory, this makes her more relatable to the jury. Her demeanor is characterized by supposed nervous laughter and constant attentiveness to the jury members. This fishing for sympathy tactic is almost too obvious and indicates that she's very worried about what the jury thinks about her.
I'm going to take you back, and if you can just tell the jury a little bit about your background. Tell us where you grew up.
I come from Austin, Texas, a small town outside of Austin that you probably haven't heard of. No one has. It's called Manor. And I was raised by my mother and my father, and I grew up with a little sister, although I have a big sister as well.
And your little sister's name is?
Her name is Whit Heard.
And how much of an age difference is there between the two of you?
Whitney and I are about 1 year, I think we're 16 months apart, so right next to each other.
Let me just, since you talked about the breaking horses, can you just tell the jury what your role is in assisting your dad on that and what is involved in breaking horses?
Objection leading.
Can you just tell me about?
Overruled. Good.
You just got to stay on, basically. I would help him. I was more of a crash test dummy. You know, when you train a horse, it's a wild animal. It doesn't necessarily like to be ridden. And there are people out there who are crazy enough, like my dad, to pick that as a profession.
Next, we get to the reason why Heard was asked about this, to give an excuse as to why she might have seemed cold in the past and cold during this trial.
And what, if anything, did you learn from your father about how to react to the horses?
Well, with training horses, I guess the key things are to not show fear, not get intimidated, not show fear, be tough and calm.
These aren't random statements. They're directly tied to her attorney's opening statement.
Amber rode horses with her father. She tried to work with him to help him break the horses. She remembers having a broken arm at least 4 times, being in casts during that time. But there were some things she learned from breaking those horses that was very significant. Her father taught her she couldn't show fear, she couldn't show pain, and she couldn't show emotion. That's how she could break those horses.
Thus, we can be sure these are rehearsed words designed to portray her a certain way. Her behavior is now excused by her background, allegedly. Next, it's about portraying Heard as a hard worker with big dreams. This feeds into the emotional concept of the American dream. It's self-praise, and Heard tries to disguise this self-praise with humble and well-meaning body language.
Tell the jury a little bit about your educational background during those growing up years and your work experience.
I worked any job that I could from the time I was really young. I wanted to get out of Texas and do something with my life and see things and do things. So I was in school and really pushed myself to, I just always pushed myself to be able to accelerate the process. I wanted to, get out of school as fast as I could, and I wanted to do more things with my life than stay in Texas. Grew up quite working class, and thankfully with as long as I maintained an A average, I enjoyed the benefit of a scholarship, and I did that until I realized that I could take my GED and SATs early, and I did that and placed out of school and effectively left school at 16 years old, I believe.
And what did you do for work during those younger years?
I took any job that I could. I worked at my father's construction company, sometimes, just administrative stuff. I mean, it was a small company. But I answered phones, and I worked at a modeling agency that was also, offered photography classes, makeup classes, hair. And I eventually worked there long enough to be able to pay for my headshots, which are the pictures that you use in the industry to promote yourself, in whatever, acting, modeling, or both.
Next, it's time for the good person strategy, which is irrelevant to the case, but very important in order to present Heard in the best light possible. If that's possible, of course.
Okay. And what, if any, charitable work did you do when you were still young?
It started off as a requirement for the school I went to, and then I liked it so much, I think, because it meant I wasn't at home, and it was important to me is just to not spend time at home. And I really loved meeting people, so I worked at the soup kitchen every morning before school, during the school year, for about 4 years. I worked at with deaf kids for a while, and I love it.
And when you worked with deaf kids, what, if anything, did you do to learn to be able to work with them?
Objection leading and 404. And relevance, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Well, I taught myself how to sign basic sign language, and then I pursued it. I audited a course at the community college, which I ended up going to get out of high school early later on. But I would audit classes. The teachers never wanted to kick the random 12-year-old out of their class, I suppose. So I remarkably was able to audit, I think, the majority of 2 semesters, and that's also helped me learn.
We can now see how the form elements are connected to the function elements. Heard has been portrayed as the very essence of the American dream. These elements are ways to make the jury members identify themselves with Heard, and she's persuading with emotional values that are easy for people to relate to, like having dreams and wanting to explore new things. The main goal of any narrative is to elicit a strong emotional reaction. Let's get to how she portrays Depp, the antagonist in her narrative. In this longer clip, we see her facial expressions change. Now she's supposedly sad, and she seeks pity from the jury.
Please continue with the painting, I'm sorry.
It seemed like nothing I could say to Johnny would convince him. He wanted me to remove the painting, and he wanted me to admit to this affair that I wasn't having. And I didn't want to admit to it because it's not true. So I held out, and he just drank more and did more cocaine. And I woke up the next morning, I think it was on the 22nd or the 23rd. I woke up in the morning and the breakfast table was like cocaine and booze. And I realized that I wasn't going to be able to talk our situation down. I wasn't going to be able to talk him out of it. And he was just so convinced that I was fighting with him or at the reason that he wouldn't leave the house, and he had something to go film that was important, and there were important people waiting for him. And I remember people were reaching out, his assistants, his manager sister, everyone was wondering where he was. And I kept feeling embarrassed and unable to move this person out of my house. I couldn't calm him down. I couldn't change. He was just so intent on me admitting the details of this affair that I wasn't having. And me pointing out that the cocaine wasn't making his situation any better made me the bad cop. Then I'm the nag.
First of all, this is a narrative with a strong, self-serving purpose. Instead of detailing the part about the affair, she makes sure to emphasize Depp's drug use. She uses his alleged uncontrolled behavior as an excuse as to why she gave up trying to talk him out of it. She clearly struggles with formulating this narrative in the most self-protective way possible because she interrupts it with this association.
Like I wasn't going to be able to talk our situation down. I wasn't going to be able to talk him out of it. And he was just so convinced that I was fighting with him or at the reason that he wouldn't leave the house, and he had something to go film that was important, and there were important people waiting for him. And I remember people were reaching out, everyone was wondering where he was. And
Association is when a speaker makes it sound like they're not alone in thinking or feeling something. Here, Hertz says people and everyone were reaching out, wondering where Depp was. In theory, this makes her experience more valid. In trials, however, attorneys are alert to association because it's most times hearsay. When she says she was embarrassed, she directly portrays Depp as not only irresponsible, but also immature. When you list another person's negative traits, it's implicitly presupposed that you possess the opposite positive traits. What's presupposed here? It's presupposed that she was the responsible adult in their relationship. In this regard, the words bad cop and nag are designed to make the jury feel bad about the labels she's unfairly been given. Just like Hertz's protagonist role was emphasized by her charity work, Depp's antagonist role is emphasized by irresponsible behavior, supposedly. Her description is hilariously obvious in its intent, and she again uses association. She also makes sure to look scared while saying it.
So we're nowhere near his home, but we were driving up this street, and he has the window down, he's smoking. It wasn't all the way down, but he's constantly smoking, and at some point he starts howling out of the window and then grabs two small dogs. Well, one was Johnny's dog and one was my dog, but he grabs, if I remember correctly, Boo, his dog, slightly chunkier teacup Yorkie, and he grabs this teacup Yorkie and holds Boo out of the window of the moving car. And he's howling like an animal while holding the dog out of the window. And everyone in the car, I'll never forget it, everyone just froze. No one did anything. And I too was like torn as to what I should do, because I didn't want to do anything to cause him to react, drop the dog. It was just this eerie moment where he's howling and holding this animal outside of the car window. And more than that weird memory is more than that weird memory, I have a memory of everyone just kind of not really reacting to him. Like no one really kind of did anything. I eventually kind of pulled his arms gently back into the vehicle and kind of got the dog back on the seat, and we continued driving, but no one reacted. It just kind of avoided dealing with it. We get to the house where he was filming this thing that he was late for, I suppose, for the day. And we walk in. Meanwhile, I've been bombarded by text messages and calls and conversations with everyone seemingly so stressed about...
Objection, hearsay.
We've now seen narrative form and narrative function in action. However, there's one last and very important component, and that's narrative probability. This has to do with coherence. Is the narrative believable? My conclusion is no, because the narrator heard is unreliable. When we compare her humble behavior in this testimony to the way she behaved in the 2016 deposition, it becomes clear that she's able to change her demeanor at the drop of a hat.
By getting him out of the door to stay in the room.
When a person's able to change this much, it's unwise to blindly believe what they're saying. Non-verbally, she looks like someone who's trying too hard to emphasize the words she's saying rather than actually re-experiencing the thing she's saying. This makes her body language unreliable. Pity is a predominant or only strategy. And the fact that she's excessively trying to persuade each jury member shows that she's very much worried about what they think about her narrative. People can portray themselves as the best people in the world, but if no one believes them, strategies and tactics are completely irrelevant. Thanks for watching.